Well, a very good evening on a Friday night. Welcome to the West Ham Voice and the first Friday late night of 2023. It's been a while since I've done a Friday late night. Been a bit busy, but I'm glad to be back and glad to have you all with me. And I've got a very special guest tonight to come on to have a chinwag about all things West Ham. I'm sure one or two of you might know him by name. And I'll bring him on in a minute. But it's good to have you on. Let's see who's in the chat and say good evening to everyone. Good evening to you, Ed. How are you, mate? Thank you for joining. Friday night tipple. No tipple for me. I've already been out, so I'm on the water, because I've had enough beers already tonight. Good evening, James. How are you, mate? Nice to see you. Good evening to you, Dabs. Feeling slightly confident for tomorrow? We've got to be, haven't we? Well, West Ham fans. Dabs, again, when you look at the form of Souček, Creswell and Antonio, you can argue more recently Rice have been our form player. Yeah. Good evening to you, Sean. How are you? I hope you're well. Daniela, how are you? Thank you for joining. Good evening to you, Howard. How are you? Good to see you. Mr. Brown, are you going tomorrow? Hope to see you there if you are. Usual suspect, how are you? Nice for you to join, mate. I hope you're well. Evening from it's 8:15. That's a bit more reasonable, Neil, isn't it? 8:15 in the morning. Mr. McCarthy, I'm never late. As I always say, you lot are always early. Everyone's saying good evening. Let's bring on our special guest and let's have a little chinwag about West Ham United, shall we? And good evening to you, X. How are you?
Good evening, mate. Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Very well, very well. Thank you for joining. I wonder how many people thought they might see your face tonight, but clearly they're going to be disappointed.
Well, I think, to be honest, that picture of me there is better than the real one. So probably not disappointed, probably relieved if they knew.
X, before we start the chinwag, I'm sure everybody knows who you are and what you're about, but can you tell them a little bit about your podcast and how they can join up on that?
Yes, I run the West Ham Way podcast with Dave Walker. It's first section's actually available for free. You can listen, I think, on all sort of podcast audio outlets. It's through Spotify, through iTunes, that sort of thing. And then the rest of it, section 2, which is generally my news, and then section 3, which is questions from the listeners, is on Patreon, which is a paid service that we have, and on there you find all sorts of podcasts. We interviewed Kevin Horlock this week, which is a brilliant interview. We've got 110 interviews now with ex-players and celeb fans and stuff. You'll get news, you'll get all sorts. It's well worth a try for anyone that hasn't tried it. And yeah, then we've got the West Ham Way website and a few different things under the West Ham Way brand. But yeah, the podcast is our main thing, I guess.
Wonderful. And I'm sure there's quite a lot of people on here tonight that are probably subscribed to that. So let's get down to the chat. I mean, it's a general chit chat, but where should we start? I guess tomorrow is as good a place as any. Big game, isn't it, tomorrow night? I guess for West Ham, but also for David Moyes. Would you say how do you feel about what's happened with the season so far? It's been an odd one, hasn't it? Because I think we after the 2 seasons that we've had, we've come to kind of expect more of the same. And is it a surprise to you as much as to many fans as to what's happened this season?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a massive disappointment, obviously, because we've been spoiled, I guess, the last couple of years with the league positions and European campaigns and so on. So being in a relegation struggle, which we are in. Obviously, the league table doesn't lie. It is a disappointment. It's a surprise in the sense that I thought that we had a great team that was going to kick on, and we'd obviously added to that in the summer by spending a lot of money on good players. I mean, we obviously the massive blow that Aguerd has only started to be able to play now, I think. And if you think about it, that was Moyes' first signing. And I think that showed that in level of importance of the signings he made, he believed that Aguerd was the most important one. So a massive blow to lose him so early. And then obviously have Zuma, his centre-back partner, been injured for periods and also playing most of the season with an injury. So I think there's been a few circumstances that have affected the season. Obviously, Noble going was obviously going to be a massive transition. You know, people talk about Ferguson at Man United, and I wouldn't put it far from that in terms of scale. So that was going to be big. So there was definitely things that meant this season probably was going to be challenging, but then there's things you could say about the manager that haven't really done himself any favours. And in terms of these next, like tomorrow, and I think the Everton games, I think at a minimum he'll get those 2 games. They're absolutely massive for him. I think the board want to hold on to him to the rest of the season. But obviously, if we get battered by Wolves and battered by Everton, it's going to be very hard for him to carry on from that point, because I think in terms of percentages, I'm in the minority that just about still back him, and I only back him at sort of 52 to 48% back him. I think in terms of the fan base, I think it's probably about 90% want him to go. So if he loses Wolves and Everton, it'll be very difficult to come back from that.
That's an interesting thing about the fan base, because I can see Dodsey, who does a few clips for me for the channel, and he goes to every game, home and away. And it's interesting because when we go to certainly to away games, and I'm sure you've been, to away games, X, it doesn't feel toxic at away games, does it?
No, you're right, mate. I've only missed 1 game all season, home and away, and that was the Steaua Bucharest one, unfortunately, or what was Steaua Bucharest, whatever they're called now. If I don't remember their names, but the Romanian team in Europe.
That's them.
Yeah, I only missed that game all season, and I think the atmosphere, particularly at away games, has never turned toxic. You're right, and particularly against Brentford and against Leeds, I thought the atmosphere was really good, given that you go on social media or you go on any sort of platform, it seems Moyes out, and some of the comments are really quite damning towards him, whereas actually at the away games, I think you're right, mate. I think the atmosphere's still been really good, and I expect the same tomorrow.
Yeah, I do, and it's really quite interesting. And I'm not saying that fans who there's a lot of fans that can't get to away games. We know how limited tickets are, but I don't know. It just feels I can't quite sort of put it in words. It almost like an acceptance of what will be, or is that really not right? I mean, are we more tolerant when we actually are at games rather than maybe sort of online, etc.?
I think you get caught up in the emotions, don't you? Like when particularly when you're at an away game, you're one of 2,000 or whatever the allocation is at that particular game, and I think you feel like you're representing the club. Well, I certainly do, and so if you go there, you want the home fans to think, "Wow, West Ham fans were really good." So I think you get caught up in the game, and obviously when you're attending a game, you want your team to win. There are some West Ham fans, dare I say it, that would probably want us to lose tomorrow so that Moyes will go. But the majority of fans, regardless of whatever your opinion is on David Moyes, they will still want to win. And I think when you're at the game, particularly away games, you get, like I say, you kind of almost forget your, I don't know what the word is, agendas or opinions or whatever you want to call them, and you just focus on those 90 minutes in front of you. So I think that's probably why. But and I do think social media does stir up things to be, I don't know, a bit more dramatic than they perhaps are. But yeah, it's no hiding from the fact that he's in a difficult position right now. I mean, his job is on the line. In modern football, you don't get time. I mean, look, they talk about sacking to Chelsea, sacking their manager. He's only been in post for a few months, having sacked the previous manager that won the Champions League the year before. So it's like, yeah, exactly, that's right. So it's like you don't get any patience in football. I mean, when you look back at West Ham's managers in the past, they always did get patience. John Lyall won FA Cups for West Ham, 2 FA Cups for West Ham, got us 3rd in the league, but also had relegations as well. And you know full well that if that had been in the modern day now, the minute we looked like getting relegated, he would have gone. He wouldn't have been given a second chance. And I think that's just modern football now as well. And given that in mind, and the fact the team does appear to be on the decline from previous seasons, he's in a very difficult position. That said, you win at Wolves, you win at Everton. The league does look very different. So he's basically got to do that. He's got to get the results. I would take a draw tomorrow and a win against Everton, and I think that would be a decent return. Obviously, 6 points would be preferable, but you take 4.
Let me ask you a question about the new players, because we hear an awful lot about Moyes says, it takes time to bed in players. And then the counter argument is that you look at other clubs and people talk about Newcastle, for example, and other teams, and how Eddie Howe, for example, doesn't seem to have a problem bedding in new players a lot quicker, a lot slicker than David Moyes seems to do. Is it more about bedding in new players, or is it more about the players that are already there in the squad maybe having to adjust as well? Because when we look at the team at the moment, there's quite a few established players in the squad that aren't quite hitting the levels that we know that they can. Bowen, for example, has been one prime example of this season. He's beginning to tick, but it's taken him a little bit of time. So is it just all about the new players bedding in, or is there quite a bit about this where our established squad have to adjust as well?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, if you look at recent seasons, Bowen, he got in the England team recently because of his performances for us. He's been a shadow of the player that he was in previous years. This year, Souček is the obvious one. I mean, anyone that listens to our show, I've always stated I didn't think he was particularly good even when he was scoring goals. But that aside, he's not scoring goals now. So you look at him, you look at some of the other players that have been around. Antonio's not been as good this season either. And I think these however many players it was, 8 was it off the top of my head, 8 or 9 maybe, new players that came in seem to have disrupted the dynamics a little bit. And I think it's taken some players that were are completely confident that they were the main man. It's kind of not their status, I guess, a little bit with these new people coming in. And yeah, I mean, it's strange, isn't it? Because like you say, other clubs seem to be able to take these players in and there's no problems whatsoever. But it's like West Ham, it's happened in the past when we've taken players in as well. There's always transitional periods. I think the problem with the players we brought in is that a lot of them had never played in the Premier League before. Again, I know other clubs take in players that haven't as well, but we took in, when you go through all of them, Downs hadn't, in the sense that obviously he played in England, but he never played to the standard of the Premier League. Then you go to Kera, never had. Aguerd, never had. Paqueta hasn't. Scamacca hasn't. Trying to think if I've missed anyone else out of the list there. Cornet's obviously been injured for a lot of it, so we've not really seen him. So I think, maybe there was quite a lot that needed to come in and adjust at the same time. I don't know. I feel like I'm making excuses when other clubs seem to deal with these things better than us. But, hopefully, after the World Cup now, I do think as well that something I've not really said before, but it came into my head a bit earlier, with the World Cup, certain players, and I don't want to name them, but it's fairly obvious the ones I'm possibly talking about might have had their eye off the ball a little bit because the World Cup was coming up and they didn't want to get particularly injured, or they want to put them completely exert themselves if it meant that they then wouldn't be available for the World Cup. Now that the World Cup's done, you've got to hope that these players can start to perform. But ultimately, the buck stops with the manager, doesn't it? Any team that's not performing, the buck stops with him. So hopefully, though, we've turned the corner, because I think Paqueta's had a couple of good games now. See, Scamacca scored the other day against Leeds. So hopefully Aguerd's back. Hopefully they're going to start to hit a bit of form now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You're absolutely right. I mean, different teams do things in different ways, and people will say that Moyes takes a lot longer to bed in players. But it's interesting what you've mentioned a couple of the established players that are not in form, and we've heard an awful lot about this man over the past week or so. David Moyes said today in this press conference he was surprised about the transfer rumours linking him to Wolves, etc. But it's quite interesting. I did a show about Antonio the other day and spoke about how a year ago he was talking about how he would encourage, he'd be encouraged by Moyes bringing in another striker, to have add competition, to add as backup, etc. And now the body language seems quite different with him, where he's now got a striker who's competing with him for the first team, but he seems to be unhappy about it. Would that be true to say? Would that be right to say that he seems a little sort of out of sorts by it?
I think so, man. I think it is true to say. I don't want to say too much on this because it's sort of stuff that goes on behind closed door. But I think it's, like you said, it's fairly obvious. His body language is not the same, and he is a different person. And I think when he asked for, I don't know how he phrased it last season, when he asked for extra competition, I think he meant, well, from reading what he's done this season, I think he meant I'm the main man, and then I need someone else that's going to come on for me for the last 20 minutes or when I'm not quite feeling it and back me up, But what's happened this year is that Scamacas obviously came in as a big money signing an Italian international and became the first choice out of the two. And I don't think that's what he meant. I think he meant he wants the number two, not for him to be number two. And I think that's why he's got his backup. And Antonio, like most strikers, it is said of most strikers, has a kind of a selfish streak in the sense that he wants to be the main man and he wants to be the man scoring the goals. And obviously he's our all-time Premier League goal scorer, so that comes with a bit of weight and a bit of clout, I guess, when you're trying to state your case in the team. And I think he's been, I just think he's been a bit put out by the fact that he isn't the first choice.
But that's quite odd, isn't it? Because it's a squad game now, and we all know this. And it's not a matter of this. This is the one thing about West Ham. Are we big enough to have a squad where we've got two very good players for each position? Because you look at teams like Man City, for example, and I'm not comparing us to City, but you look at some of the bigger teams and you think, for some reason, Guardiola seems to keep even his £100 million player happy, even if he's sitting on the bench, etc. We're not at that level, are we? We'd love to be, but we're not at the level where we can have two very good players for each position and keep them happy. And maybe that's the problem about West Ham is you come into West Ham and you expect to be, if you're, I know Antonio has been with us for a number of years and we didn't pay that much money for him, but I guess people have an expectation if they're brought into the club, they're automatically meant to be the number one in each position.
I think so. No, exactly. Yeah, I think that's right. When you come to West Ham and you're a big money signing, or you're an established player that's been contributing for West Ham, because, as you said, we're not the size of Manchester City or what some of the other big teams. That I think, they kind of almost automatically assume that they are the main guy, and maybe they came to West Ham to be the main guy. They didn't come to be in a rotational squad system, and maybe it does get their backs up. And I guess as well, as I said, I've been defending Moyes recently, but if you look at David Moyes' track record when he was at Everton, where he made his name really. He worked with a small squad, and then he went to Manchester United where he had the problem he's kind of got at West Ham, obviously on a grander scale, but he had players that could compete for each position, and he had big name players as well. He struggled, he struggled to manage Manchester United, and he was gone before the season was complete. And then you go into like the other clubs as well. Obviously, none of them. When he was in Spain, I don't know what their squad was like when he was out there, but maybe he prefers to have a very strong 11 that's clearly the best 11, and then players that can step in when needed. Maybe he struggles to have a squad of top players as well. But it maybe is also to do with the stature, because when you rank West Ham in terms of Premier League clubs, and I hate to say it, I'm obviously West Ham's a massive West Ham fan, but you look at it, you got Manchester United, Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham, Newcastle now. You could argue that you've got Villa maybe in terms of size, but there's a good number of clubs. Probably Liverpool, Everton, miss those, but certainly Liverpool, that are big clubs. And maybe when players that are playing for Brazil and playing for Italy and Germany and so on, they move to West Ham, they expect to be in the team. Maybe we haven't quite made that transition yet as other players seeing us as a top side. I don't know. It's hard to put an answer on these things, because it always seems to be West Ham, doesn't it? Like it seems like every other club can do it, but we can't. So it's hard to actually precisely say what the problem is. But hopefully one day we'll sort it out.
Now, I'm going to bring on someone I'm sure you know. Are you ready? Give me a thumbs up if you are.
I don't know who you're bringing in now, mate. Oh, here he is.
I didn't know if he was going to come tonight. I said, are you coming on? He got upset because I called you a special guest and I don't call him a special guest. I told him he's a co-host.
And apparently it's me with the ego, hey?
I guess you haven't got any heating in your shed.
Oh, it's fucking cold in here.
How are you?
Who's lurking over your shoulder, mate? The first one's, is it One Chop? I can see.
No, it's Ian Wright and Joe Cole.
Oh, right, is it? Okay, yeah, I can't quite see it 'cause it's so dark. But nice one. Why those two?
Because I bought them at auction.
Oh.
I didn't mean to, but
You didn't know what you was getting.
that's what turned up. I wanted something else, and I bid for that as well, just to double it up. And I lost the first item and I won that.
Nice.
I bid on them. I actually bid on them to get free delivery. And by not winning the first item, it meant I had to pay more money for the delivery than what I paid for them. Yeah.
Let's go on to Mr. Dawson. I mean, we've heard what David Moyes said in his press conference today, that we've received a bid. I mean, that's not an exclusive or anything like that, you know. And but I sort of said to you just before we came on, X, that Moyes looked quite composed when he was talking about Dawson, which seems to suggest to me that he's probably got something lined up, because I cannot see us letting him go without getting someone in. And don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for any exclusives or anything, but it must mean that Moyes, looking as calm as he did, he's ready to let him go. I'm guessing.
I think the situation with Dawson's been going on since the summer. Now I can't specify exactly what it is because it's not right for me to do that. But he's got personal issues, which is why he needs to move up north. And I can sympathise with those personal issues, and he, as I think everyone would if they knew. So he needs to be allowed to go. I'm under the understanding that he's not going to be involved in the squad tomorrow. I'm pretty sure he doesn't start, and I'm pretty sure he's not on the bench. And I think the manager's made the decision because of the situation that he's in to kind of take him out of the firing line, so to speak. And I think he's probably composed in the sense that he's probably known that this was coming, because, as I say, this situation's been going on since the summer, and it's not as if it's suddenly been sprung on him, like with Payet and Bilic back in the day. That was kind of really thrust upon Bilic, and he seemed really uncomfortable and not knowing what to say about it. This has been going on for so long now that he's probably been able to prepare for this moment. Now, I don't know if we've got a replacement at this point. I think obviously we're talking to a number of centre-backs and hoping to get one in as quickly as possible, but I would be very surprised if Craig Dawson is a West Ham player by the end of this transfer window. I wouldn't even be surprised if he goes next week, but I think a replacement does depend on that. But unfortunately with Dawson, it's a situation that's beyond really West Ham's control as such. And it was a shame, because what a servant he's been to the club.
Yeah. I mean, Nigel, Dawson surprised all of us, isn't he? I remember when we signed him, and everyone was like, what the hell's Moyes doing? He hasn't got a clue, bringing in a second-rate defender, etc. I mean, he's become an icon, hasn't he? I mean, clearly it looks like he will go.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, okay, he's become a fan favourite. He's delivered above and beyond what any of us expected.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've got value for money out of him.
Oh God, yeah.
We've for a bloke. I mean, if you go back to the Twitter reaction, which I remember from when he was first picked, and I remember saying, let's give the man at least one game before we condemn him. And then he played really well in that. And since then, he's hardly ever put a foot wrong, always turned up and delivered. As X said, we knew in the summer that he wanted out. And for whatever reason, probably a Gerd's injury put paid to that, if we're being truthful. He probably was surplus to requirements. And then a Gerd's injury meant no. With Zuma's injury, thank God we had him.
Yeah,
frankly, and it might be some of that was clad in Moyes' reasoning coming up to this winter, but and letting him go. But he is letting him go. It was documented he want to go back for family reasons. So be it. I think the club, when it comes down to family issues and what the club know about his family issues, I think holding on to him would be scandalous, actually. Pulling him from the Wolves game, actually, I think's quite right. Frankly, I'd have said to him, look, we'll let you go, but it'll be January the 30th. And you'd have to sit out the Wolves game, because the last thing you want, the money's on he's going to Wolves. Though I don't, there could be another team or whatever, but I think the money's on he's going to Wolves. And you wouldn't want to play him against Wolves, would you? If you know he's going there, and we're both fighting to stay in the Premier League, the last thing you want to do is having a defeat. Imagine if he played out of his skin, blocked a goalwood shot at 0-0, West Ham get a point, and Wolves go down by a point.
Or even worse, he goes up for a corner and scores the winner.
Yeah, scores the winner. It's just, no, but those things could happen, isn't it? And then he goes.
Classic West Ham.
Well, yeah. Not in reverse, though.
Yeah.
So it's perhaps with a Gerd coming back, Zuma's on his way back. Reinforcements hopefully on their way.
I mean, how much of an influence has Dawson been? I mean, he has been, he has been phenomenal for us. He's going to be missed, isn't he?
Oh yeah, I mean he's very, very popular, both with fans obviously and within the changing room. I remember before he played for us, when he was on loan to start with and hadn't really broke into the team. I was hearing about how good he was on the training ground and how much the players liked him before he started for us. So then when he came in and played as well as he did, the people that were saying these things to me were like, well, there you go, he told you, and he's been brilliant ever since. And I think he's very, very popular. You can see why. He puts he's 100% into every game. He's a really nice lad as well. And yeah, it'll be a big loss. Another loss from the dressing room, which I think is something that has affected us this season as well as another issue to talk about. Obviously, Mark Noble is the obvious one, but you lost David Martin, who effectively, towards the end of his time at West Ham, was just there for morale, really. Ryan Fredericks was another important person in the dressing room. I think Yarmolenko was popular. I'm trying to remember who left at the end of last season now, but certainly that's 4 players there that were well liked, and Dawson is
and very vocal as well.
Yes, mate. And I think taking them out the dressing room is a big loss, and Dawson will be a big loss, definitely. Obviously, it depends who's brought in to replace him, but yeah, I think he'll be missed, and I think the players will be sad to see him go, definitely.
So, talking of influences, we've got this young man back, Mark Noble. I mean, what do you both think about Noble coming back in the role that he's in? Oh, you're already umming and ahhing there, Nigel. I mean, all right,
fantastic appointment,
Nigel.
Fantastic appointment. I mean, the things he's learned in a month at Harvard are really going to benefit this club a long way.
You're so sarcastic.
I'm like trying to be genuine for a change. I mean, he's fantastic. A sporting director. What he's going to direct sporting wise.
So you're not overly enthused by the appointment, I'm guessing.
Do you know what? It's quite funny. I think did Moyes call him the apprentice the other day?
He sure did.
That was quite telling in a way, because it might be the apprentice sacking the manager then. If things don't go right. Look, I suppose he's got to start at some point, isn't it? But the fact is that, even Billy Bonds was youth manager when he retired and earned his way up reserve team manager and then got the form manager's job. I don't think he's done his apprenticeship. So to get a job like that straight away, it smacks of the board. I don't know. I don't know to say like pandering to the fan base in a way. But a bit of PR.
They have done a lot of that in the past, though.
Oh,
and
don't get me started.
All right, let's not start even
even this week, the photo opportunity that they put out. Everybody, I'd have thought any other club would have done it privately, but not West Ham. And they must have bought every member of staff at the ground a new scarf by the looks of them.
X, what's your take on Noble's appointment? Probably quite different to Nigel's.
I was going to say, Nigel and I often disagree. So on this, so to stick to form, I disagree. I think for the last couple of years, whilst obviously officially he hasn't been doing his apprenticeship as such, he's been going to the academy regularly. Obviously his son plays the academy, so that's one reason, but he's been going to the academy to learn from them, see what it's all about. I know he's had meetings with the likes of Kenny Brown, I guess, and anyone else involved in the academy. I know he's been attending board meetings last season as well, and I think effectively for the last couple of years they've been working towards this point. So whilst by title he might have not had the official apprenticeship role, so to speak, and I do get what Nigel's saying, like he has almost got a really elite position in the club through no qualifications, obvious qualifications as such, other than being a West Ham hero on the pitch. So I do get what Nigel's saying. It's not it's a valid opinion, definitely, but I do think he's massively important. You talk to any ex-player that has been at the club when Noble has, and we've been lucky enough on our podcast to interview many, and they always stress how important he was in terms of them settling in, the team spirit, dealing with any player that might be playing up or whatever, and bringing people to task, explaining what West Ham is to like what an honour it is to play for us. And I think his role between the players, the manager, and the board will be really important because the players love him, the manager loves him. I don't know whether the board do or not, but I assume they do by appointing him. So I think he'll have good relationships with all of them, and I think he'll be crucial to us going forward, personally.
What do you think, Mark? What do you think? Do you think it's a good appointment? Oh, yes. Nodding dog. That's Mark Noble's, yeah? Nodding dog. Look, there he is. I'm calling this dog Mark Noble from now on. Sporting director, 6'2".
I mean, so you saying, Nigel, that he's basically just there to do what David Sullivan tells him?
Look, it starts with the speech at the last night of the bowling, yeah? This club's not a circus anymore. 2 years later, Jerry Cottle couldn't have done a better job in what was going on. And I'm not saying he's a bald puppet and stuff. People know I'd lost a lot of respect for him after Burnley and everything else. And perhaps I am being harsh on him. But I think I expected better from people from the area. Yes, I get you. He grew up as a kid. He loved it. He may not know the difference between Plaistow and Canning Town, but I may even forgive him that. But yes, he does know what it means to be a West Ham player. And I've always believed that the club has to have someone from the area playing for us. Now, the only one I can see from the academy, I don't know if there's others, is Mubama, who's a Silvertown boy. So hopefully we got that to come in. Obviously, you've got Stevie Potts' young boy, who would have grown up around the club or knowing what the club and everything else as well. So for me, I always, there is at least a West Ham heartbeat there. Not the corner phrase. So
linking up to the future stars. I mean, one of the things that Noble, my understanding is, he's been brought in to do is to oversee or recommend. Correct me if I've got this wrong, but to sort of recommend, which of the rising stars might be sort of worth pushing, etc. Is that right in my thinking, or?
I think so. I mean, I just want to challenge something that Nigel just said previously,
sure.
just to go back to it. Why is it so important that the person has to be from East London? Like, knowing that obviously football's a global sport now, it's all over, the world, in terms of the internet, in terms of your fan base, in terms of the players that represent the club. You go through West Ham's history and you pick out legends of the club. Not all were born in East London. Not all were from within the Bow Bells, or however you're defining that these people need to be. And I don't see how just because of where they're born, it makes them more suitable for a position within West Ham than someone that's born in Australia, for example. Yes, you need to understand the East End, you need to understand the people and the community and the fan base and the history and so on, but you can do that from not being born, right in the centre of it.
It's not about people that are born in West Ham should have places, seniority places in the club. You should have someone at the club, though, that understands it. The reason why I do that...
Yeah, but that's not on their birthplace.
Hold up. The reason why I like to have someone born in West Ham at the club is that because the fact is West Ham at the end of the day was formed to represent the area of West Ham. West Ham wasn't formed in 1900. It was a borough that dates back to, Edward the Confessor, in 10 whatever. West Ham didn't just appear. It's not just a football club. Yeah. So for those that are, there are a few of us, believe it or not, that were born in the area. And when I say that, I know you're a Leytonstone boy.
Yeah.
Waltham Forest. Just saying.
So I don't know if I count or not.
just saying. So there are those of us who think that there should still be a connection to the old ways, that we shouldn't just, this globalization of football and everything else and the Premier League and everything, it ain't as fantastic as people make it out. I'm not a great lover of it. Unfortunately, West Ham is our club and I'm addicted to it and I can't walk away from it. But many have. But the fact is that there should still be a connection to the area with people at the club. Now, we do get that with Mark Noble. So I do think that it is, I'm not saying at the end of the day, Billy Bonds was a South London boy. Don't make him any less West Ham. But when Billy Bonds was playing, he did play with people that were brought up West Ham. What I'm saying is, it's getting to the point where you got no one.
No,
and
I totally
the
get
club
that.
loses a connection to everything that's gone before has helped to make the club what it is. And at some point, you have to keep that connection. Just because every other Premier League club progresses the way it does and can walk away from its past or will buy and put out a team full of foreigners, I've always said, don't mean West Ham have to follow that way.
No, I 100% understand what you're saying. You've got to have that connection. The history of West Ham is as important as anything. And, our history is impressive. It's something that we must celebrate because, and I'm speaking from, the fact my family grew up, or I was born in Leytonstone, but my family lived in West Ham. And so I 100% know what that means to keep that history of West Ham going. But, you're talking, in my opinion, I don't think necessarily the birthplace of the person is essential. It's whether they understand the club is the most important thing. Had Mark Noble been born 20 miles up the road in Essex or whatever, I don't think his understanding of West Ham and his ability to have that role would be any different. The same as me.
No, but then I would say to that is, hold up, let's get this right, Mark Noble, has literally traded off the born in Canning Town thing, The club have thrown that out. The fact that in the video they put out, the first house he's living in next door is actually in Plaistow. I'm not going to split hairs or whatever. We'll go either there or those. My wife came from Plaistow. I ain't knocking it. Some of my family lives in Plaistow.
The reason why I'm keeping quiet is because I was born nowhere near the area.
You are,
and neither was Sean, your Sean Whetstone.
Listen, but listen, I call Sean a Mockney, not a cock. So okay. And it's not about, I don't look down on people where they're born, like supporting the club and whatever. But as someone that lives and breathes the history of the club, and knows why the club was set up and why it was called West Ham United and not another name that it could have been called, was for it to represent the borough of West Ham United. So therefore, I think it's quite right that we still have people from the borough playing or working or in a position of seniority at the club. Now, you could say we had that with David Gold. He's passed now.
So yeah, I mean, so if we go back and we look at some of these West Ham legends that you would say, whether they understood the club or not. Let's take Trevor Brooking, for example. Played for the club all his life.
Grew up a West Ham fan, though, didn't he?
Grew up a West Ham fan. Yeah, he's born in Barking. Does Barking count?
Yeah, okay. Counts.
All right, Paolo Di Canio.
Of course, I mean, look, Paolo Di Canio would have known nothing about realistically West Ham until he played against us, for Sheffield Wednesday. And I think he tore us one in one game with Carboni, if I remember the first time I watched him. So, he grew to love the club by being there. That's totally different to being a little kid. When the reason why David Gold was so popular, because he could tell the stories of the 8-year-old little boy, looking out of his bedroom window and staring at the football ground. That's why people went misty-eyed over David Gold. Paolo Di Canio can't do that. But that's different.
Looking at the geography of where West Ham are now, obviously we've moved to Stratford. We're not in the same place as we were before. Going forward, you're going to get less and less people that were obviously born near Upton Park. Where do you, for the future then?
But hold up. No. See, don't say it's not about Upton Park, is it? It's a wider area than Upton Park.
Okay.
Now, if I really wanted to split hairs, technically West Ham or Upton Park was in East Ham, not in West Ham. So Stratford is where West Ham Town Hall is, and it was the central municipal area of West Ham for a start. So, the club tried to badge it as we were moving home back in 2011.
I mean, whenever you just know that you're going to get a history of the area when Nigel's on, don't you?
I mean, and it's impressive, and I respect it. I wish that my knowledge of the area was as extensive.
But that's the thing, and this is the thing. When I say it's not about. I'm not saying I'm fully conversed that the players are not going to come from the area. Jesus Christ. I think a third of the team came from Scotland when West Ham was formed, because they'd come down to work in the Thames Ironworks because they'd built ships on the Clyde and up there, and had followed the work down into London. So, funny enough, if you look back, the early days, we had about 2 or 3 Scottish players. And players, I mean, Sid King come from Gravesend, Kent. And for me, it ain't about that. But if you look at it, there were the players that would have born and brought up in the area that would have known about the club and would have been steeped in it.
I mean, I think it's going to change with time. When you look at the demographic,
of course, it's going to change. The Premier League.
But you look at the demography of East London now.
Mate, it's changed already.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So going forward, it can't last much longer.
No, but you got to fight for something you believe in. You get, and the club could do something about it. The club, I think they've got better with their work in the community in the local area. But for a club that picks its history up when it wants to, it could do more with the local area to keep them involved.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I do see the importance of keeping the history 100%. I'm someone that, as I said earlier, that really believes our history is one of our most impressive things, and one of the things
it's
that
all we
got.
Celebrate.
Yeah, it is, and it's something to be proud of. Everyone hears the story of East London through the ages, and all the glamour and the hard times and the differing lifestyles that come with the different eras. And I think it's something that is to be celebrated. I just think, in terms of a football role at the club, whether you're born 5 miles up the road doesn't affect your ability to do it. That's what I was trying to emphasise. But I do get your point, definitely.
Let's bring it back to Noble's influence, and I do want to focus for a minute on the youth, because we heard today that they smashed. I can't remember who they played today, but they smashed them 5-2 or something.
Yeah, it's Aston Villa away.
5-2,
yeah.
I mean, so last season we had what were the under 23s, which are now the under 21s, who had a fantastic season, and this season we got the under 18s. Who are having an absolutely a storming season. And you can see what's happening with the development of the youth. You've got quite a lot of the under 18s are now in the under 21 squad. And we've got quite a few players who have sort of gone out on loan. I know he's only just come back. but his name's gone completely. I'm looking at him and I can't remember his name. But anyway, thank you, Okoflex. So what is the situation with the youth system? We heard when David Moyes came back, when he became a permanent, when he took the job on permanently, that he has a vested interest in the development squad, in the academy, etc. But then we get the other side of David Moyes, who he talks about, youth development and so on, but then he doesn't give them an opportunity to really express themselves. I mean, we're talking about Mbama, who I know everyone was upset about Perkins leaving for Leeds. I think Mbama's going to be a bigger player than Perkins. Fingers crossed. From what we've seen of him, what is it about the youth system? What is it that Moyes has to do, or what should he do to allow the youth to sort of express themselves in the senior team? And can Noble be part of that sort of allowing these guys to develop into the senior team?
Well, look, quickly, first things first, you would like to think that the youth teams play a similar formation as the first team, because for a start, you'd hope to get an understanding. Everything should start from the youth team upwards. It should all be played the same way. That's how you get, when you look at the teams that integrate their youths better, everything starts from the youth. The way it's played and everything is dictated by the club, not exactly by the manager. So the club hires a manager that should fit in with that way of playing. I don't think West Ham do that for a start, but that's how it should be done. And then that way, when you get a player that's playing really well in the youth team, or in the under-18s as it is, the under-23s, although, let's face it, have struggled, though they have started to pick up points. So they were bottom of the table. I think they've just gone out. I think they're third from bottom now. So, but then that's how you should then integrate the young players in. And when they're 18, 19, they should be making their debuts. They should be getting 2, 3 games, 4 games. It used to be done as the season dwindled. Yeah. So like April, May, you would see young players coming into the team given a chance, or at the start of the season when points, and when you're not desperate for points, and then you would see how they perform. There's a long litany, isn't there? The club was, we call ourselves the academy. It's a self-titled thing. The rest of football didn't give it to us. We claim that. The Academy of Football. The reason was because we were well known for bringing through being youth players and helping to make players, not just for West Ham, but if you came to West Ham and you learned how to play football, you could go and make a living in football elsewhere. Now, to do that, you've got to have the right coaches. It looks like that's happening. If you look at the under-18s, scouting's got to be working, coaching's got to be working. The ability of the players looks to be good. We've seen Mbama come in the European game, played really well. We can't. It was unlucky that the goal got given to the defender and not him. But then, why wasn't that continued? When you're allowed to pick 8, 9 substitutes, it should be compulsory. 3 of them are from the academy. Should be compulsory, not just for West Ham, or every Premier League club. That's what it should be. So they get the chance to hang around the first team, but bloody use them as well.
X, what do you make of it? I mean, I know you have an interest in the youth development, etc. How do you see it panning out? Because people do accuse Moyes of almost ignoring the academy, and there's been suggestions of, well, why bother having in the academy if like Nigel's just said, if youth players are not going to get an opportunity? I mean, do they get any lesser opportunity at West Ham than they would at any other club? Is that how it actually really is, or is it really no different at most Premier League clubs?
I think I'm going to actually shock horror agree with Nigel on something here. I think he makes a very good point. I think the
we capture teams,
that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it happens now and again.
The youth teams do need to mimic what the first team's doing, because it prepares them for the transition much easier. if you're playing a completely different formation under 23, say, and then you're asked to step into the first team and you've been playing right back for one and wing back for the other or whatever it may be, I think it does make that transition a lot harder. So I do agree there should be almost like an agreed formation and style of play that is replicated across all the teams, because then the movement between the squads is a lot easier. I totally agree with that. I think the problem with current football, again, to go back to that, is that it's a results-based business so much more now that you have to get results. And if you lose 3 or 4 or whatever it may be, you're already facing the sack potentially as a manager. So I think managers are always under that pressure that they'd rather pick someone that they think has proven, has established, has played in the Premier League or at least played, at a top level before, than risk playing an academy player that we're not is a bit of an unknown. And that's really detrimental because obviously players can step in. Declan Rice being the obvious example, but Ben Johnson, has done the same. And there's been others in the European games that have. But because there's such high pressure on every game, it's not like in the past where you can sort of gradually bed them in over a season and it wouldn't matter too much. You've got to get results from them instantly. And where you can bring in players, and this is again where I agree with what Nigel was saying, with having, you should have a quota that you have to play in a squad, where you can bring in overseas players. Managers, rather than develop a 17-year-old or whatever it may be, remember like Paul Allen, to show my history knowledge, played for West Ham in a cup final at 17. You wouldn't tend to get that now because you'd bring in a foreign player that might not be potentially as good, but has got more experience. And so I think unfortunately you do need to change the rules somewhat to make sure that you do have to include domestic players. I mean, they tried that with the domestic rule, but it's still easy to get around. I think the abolishment of the old traditional reserve system is a factor as well. Now you've got the under 23s, and then it's the first team, and there's nothing in between. But back in the day when not that long ago, when I first started watching West Ham, I would go and watch reserve team games because you'd get the top youngsters, but you'd get the first team players that were either out of favour or coming back from injury, and the opposition would do the same thing. So these kids were being tested against senior pros before they were risked in the first team.
That's a big myth, isn't it? That's something that I think is really, it's a shame that that's been taken out of the game in a way, by creating the under 21 league and the under 18 league, etc., because it kind of, the reserves were a far better gauge of how a young player was going to sort of develop.
Exactly.
You had older pros that were coming back from injury.
Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing is, reserve football was back in the day when when me and X would have been watching. It was only one sub.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you would only take 12 players to a first game. And I used to go over and watch the reserves. It'd be Saturday 3:00. So while West Ham were playing away, as a kid, I'd be watching reserve football over at Upton Park.
So, I did.
It's and like he said, this is how you test the youngsters. And if you watch Canning Town Lens Film Academy 74 and listen to the boys that played, there was 15-year-olds. There was a couple of them that were 15, 16 playing reserve team football next to Bobby Moore, Billy Bonds.
Yeah, exactly.
These were the people. And imagine what that does for a kid. Not just the stories they've got to tell, but they said it made them feel 10 foot tall and everything. Yeah. And there's such a detachment now from the first team to the youth and the academy players. They're not even training on the same pitches next to each other now.
Yeah.
So I think. Sorry, when you talk about the opposition they would have faced as well, obviously you're right, playing alongside Bobby Moore, but then on the flip side, they'd have been playing against some of these players. And I remember hearing, I can't remember what ex-player it was that told me this now, but they were playing reserve football for West Ham when it was reserve football, and they came up against Vinnie Jones in central midfield when they were a 17-year-old. Now, if you're going to get an education into football and into life, you go against Vinnie Jones, and he said Vinnie Jones kicked him all over the park, he trod on his toes, he pinched him, he called him all sorts of names under the sun, but it gave him that education, that mental toughness to think, well, I've faced Vinnie Jones now, I could go out and play at Upton Park in front of 25,000 or whatever it was at that time. And I think that is a massive gap. You know, when you go see under 23s, unless it's a big game, the attendances are low. You know, so you don't get that atmosphere where there was more at reserve games than there was at under 23s, unless it's like a big one, and you don't get the opposition. And I think they don't get the experience, and therefore they have to fall back the leagues. If you look at the England squad now, if you go through like what was the England World Cup squad, most of those players have had to play at a lower club and then get them way back into the Premier League. A lot of them have. A lot of them have had to go out on loan to get experience and stuff. Very few of them come straight into the first team and set the world alight and stay there. And I think, the lack of reserve football is a big factor probably now. And I would say it's the same for most clubs. You get some clubs that play more than others, but when you look at Man City and Manchester United and Liverpool and clubs like that recently, it's you can pick one or two of their academy players.
Yeah, but United, as big as United are, they still give their kids a chance. You know, Rashford, 18, you got that Elanga. The other one who's got, is it Greenwood or whatever? You know, they've all been given a chance while young. The other week, we had Antonio with a problem, Skamaka injured. We've got a kid, and this is a problem where with under 18. So we've got Mbama who has been scoring goals, but he's been doing it against 16, 17-year-olds, the same age as him. You wonder if he was playing reserve team football and he was doing it against reserve keepers, then who would have been the substitute first teamers, basically, then you'd have a better understanding. Can he go in? Because ideally, you're thinking you're supposed to be able to pick these kids in. You know, Tony Cottee came in because I think Swindlehurst was out injured. We lost Swindlehurst to injury, and I don't think it was Sandy. It might have been Sandy Clark as well. That weren't available, and he basically he'd played reserve team football. He was still only 17. Cottee gets put in, scores on his debut, and then he don't look back. You know, all of a sudden, John Lyle's going, "Oh, well, we better keep him in." And I think he got another 3 or 4 in the next 6 games, and that's it. He's, what if those injuries hadn't have happened?
He wouldn't have got a chance, probably.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you bring in academy players as well, players that have come through the youth system at the club, it gives a bit of a lift to fans because we all see someone come through, and I think it also buys the team a little bit more time. When you've got a player that's in the academy, as long as they're giving 100%, you can kind of say, right, okay, they didn't play that well today, but they're a young lad, they're learning their trade. And I think just injecting a couple of them can actually turn things around. There's been players that have left West Ham over recent years, and yes, not many of them have come back to haunt us in terms of proving themselves in the Premier League. But there's been players that I thought they should have been given more of a chance than they were. But it's a frustrating thing because it's great for us to see players come through the youth team.
Let me ask a quick question, then we'll go on to make probably the final topic of tonight, because a lot of people are asking about, the Moyes situation. I know we started the show about that, but a quick one from, X. When you look at the youth players, who in your mind have you seen over the last, say, couple of seasons that you think really is on the brink of making it through is there any one or any couple of players in your mind that you think are really on the verge of breaking through?
It is quite difficult to judge because, like, as you say, I've never seen them come up against men, so to speak, but I always thought Conor Coventry was a very good player. I don't think necessarily he's maybe shown that in the games that he's featured in this season, but it's been hard coming in, coming out, playing alongside Souček at times. I do think Conor Coventry is a very good player. I think Oliver Scarles showed in he's called Oliver, isn't he? Yeah, in Europe, playing on the left. I thought he looked brilliant, and I thought he had a great game. And I've heard good things about him prior to that game, so he lived up to it. And Bama, the strikers, looked good. I'm saying obvious ones here, but I've heard that Freddie Potts is good, Dan Chesters is good, and there's actually a player that's I can't remember his name now, and it's going to bug me, but in the under-16s that they're talking, it's like the next Joe Cole, like he's meant to be like that talented, but again, whether that will be the case in 5 years' time when he's 21 or whatever, who knows? But the under-18s, must have some good players because they've got a 100% record and they're absolutely. I was going to swear, and I'm sure we're allowed to swear at this time, aren't we? Absolutely pissing.
You can go for it, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. So they must have some decent players there, but until they become tested against Premier League players, it's very hard to judge because not only is it a different physical game, but it's also a different mental game as well. So I find at the moment it's hard to know for certain. And if you was to ask any of the coaches, they might pick one or two that are talented now, but they might not make it long term. I mean, we interviewed Tony Carr. And when you ask, absolute legend of academy football, when you ask Tony Carr, who do you think should have made it that didn't, he can list 3 or 4 players that he says were better than the likes of, Rio Ferdinand and Joe Cole and all those that came through but didn't quite make it because they didn't have the right psychology. So there's so much to the player that is a factor.
Yeah. Right, let's move on to the subject that we all love to hate.
Well, quickly, the one thing I'd add is I think one who may come back, actually, to haunt us, I don't know what X I think, is Josh Cullen.
Yeah,
he definitely had something about him. He definitely, I think, deserved to be treated better.
He's a West Ham boy.
Yeah, he went off to Anderlecht, so he weren't afraid to move. He obviously did really well there because the first signing that company made at Burnley was Josh Cullen.
Yeah,
and you can see that. I mean, the Burnley fans that I follow on social media are absolutely loving it at the moment because they're not just riding high top of the table, but because they're playing a different brand of football as well.
There's another one I want to throw into the hat. Reece Oxford, who, I mean, I know a very different situation, because he was a bit of a Jack the Lad, and that's probably why he ended up leaving. But he's gone off to Germany, and he's done quite well there as well. There's talk about him lately, or is he someone that could come back to West Ham?
I think he's got the definite potential. I mean, when he was playing for the academy, everyone at academy level always said he was better than Declan Rice at the time, and I think that actually helped Declan because it put him out of the limelight and put Reece into it. And unfortunately for Reece, he got given a 20 grand a week contract after he'd played 2 or 3 games, and that just went to his head, and I think he thought he was established before he was established. And it's a sad story really with him because he should have been a lot better for us than he is. He's playing for a lower league German, he's in the top league I think, but a lower
Augsburg
league. Augsburg, that's it, German team. So there is talk he could come back to us, but I don't think he's gonna ever fulfill the potential that he should have fulfilled.
You've just got me on to asking another topic now, and I'll ask it very, very briefly. And it's the whole thing about young players and contracts. And we hear an awful lot about, what's happened over the past years. We've had Ngakia, we've got the Ashby situation now. We had Perkins at the end of last season. Now, you hear 2 sides of the story on these things. One side of the story is, the manager's not giving them enough game time, so they get frustrated and they want to leave. And then you hear the other side of the story that they've got agents who want to sort of try and get them 20, 25, 30 grand a week or whatever contracts. I mean, how much of that, is there an element of truth from both things, or is it more gauged on one side or the other? Is it because they're getting frustrated as young players and not getting game time, or is it because they're being given a nudge by their agents to say you deserve big contracts?
Well, speaking of a couple of players that I know that you mentioned there, they were offered the equivalent of about, I don't know, put numbers on it, but again, it's probably confidential, but an equivalent like wage of, let's just estimate, let's say £3,000 a week, where they could go to another club and be given 15,000 a week, 18,000 a week. And I think we've almost been stung a little bit by the Reece Oxford situation that we're cautious to ever offer those contracts. So if you take Sonny Perkins, for example, I don't know the exact figures, obviously, but I would speculate that he's on around about 5 times the amount he was going to be on at West Ham. And so then they come back to West Ham and say, I think you need to pay me more. We don't want to break the wage structure that we've got in place for young players, and then it causes them to leave. And it's going to be a tricky one going forward. Ben Johnson's another one. He believes that's why he's not signed a new contract at the moment. I think he believes he should be on more, but we're turning around and say, well, you're not established Premier League player yet. You've done well in the Premier League. You're not established. And I think if you're going to bring in a player, you can recruit them by saying, well, look, we'll give you this much. And it's much easier to take people out of the academy. They don't have that apprenticeship now where they used to clean the boots of the senior pros and stuff. They're instantly thinking about the next paycheck. And unfortunately, that can derail their progression at clubs. And of course, agents play a big part in that.
What do you think of that, Nigel? I mean, we do hear that both sides of the story on most players, and again, it seems to be like it's as if it only happens to West Ham, but clearly it happens at other clubs as well.
Sonny Perkins' situation. Look at Jermaine Defoe. He was a Charlton. Yeah, we took him at 16. Back then, I don't know if it's still the same. At 16, they then had to sign associated schoolboys or apprentice contract, but they could walk away for a tribunal fee. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Kerbishley was manager of Charlton, and he was fuming.
Yeah.
That happened, but so Perkins was made an offer, and he weren't going to take it. So he's gone to Leeds. The funny thing about it is that there was all this talk a couple of years ago, wasn't there? Moyes, the Red Bull mantra.
Yeah.
Well, Leeds went and got a Red Bull manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're a bit hit or miss, Leeds, but by going out and recruiting, if you look at what they've done, they are following the Red Bull mantra. You look at that Nonso, you look at, is it Somerville who's the one that done Kufal? They're getting these young players in the team and playing. I think that Nonto's, was he 19 still or something like that? Yeah. From, so they're...
And if they make it, they'll be worth big money. And
well,
they can sell them on.
This is the thing as well, is that what is West Ham's place in the pecking order? Would fans be happy if we did buy teenagers and sold them on to bigger clubs when they're 22, 23 or younger? Because that's how a lot of the lower clubs.
We'll know at the end of the season when we sold Declan for a lot of money. And
yeah, but Declan was in a way was always going to progress past us at some point, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Some may say we've done well to hold him on for the past year. Yeah. But look at Declan. I think up until, how old is he? 23?
Yeah.
So therefore he could have played under 23 football still.
And many would say if Moyes had been there a season earlier, he might still be playing.
I think some of the players that come and played in the European games, like Zagreb, were like 21, 22, making their third or fourth appearance for West Ham, lining up alongside Declan Rice, who's played 150 times. So obviously Declan's head and shoulders about that, but at some point, you play them or move them on. But as X said earlier, when you listen to Tony Carr, and I can really, who has realistically gone out there and played for bigger clubs than West Ham?
Yeah. Over the past few years, no,
they haven't.
It hasn't happened.
Ray Allen.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the last because everyone's chomping at the bit. Nigel, everyone's chomping at the bit. Sorry, Nick is chomping at the bit. Okay, let's say X, I know we spoke about this at the beginning of the show, so do forgive me for sort of going over this again. But what happens if we lose tomorrow? What happens to David Moyes' position? If we lose, is he given one more chance against Everton? Or is it really curtains for him if we lose the game tomorrow against Wolverhampton?
I don't factually know the answer to that. I can give an opinion, but certainly not factual. I would think, just going by, and I'm not saying this is the right decision or not, I would think even if we lost tomorrow, knowing how much I think the board want to back him, he would still get the Everton game. If we then lost the Everton game, I would be surprised if he was still in position, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. All I'm basing it on is knowing how reluctant the board are to dismiss him.
Yeah, Nigel.
Hold up. Yeah, Sean. What happened? What did he say? All right. Yeah. No, you don't know fuck all either. Listen, at the end of the day, we had that added mantra: if you lose his six on, no manager can survive losing six on the trot. Well, game 6 he drew. So does that reset the clock?
Probably.
Can a manager take 1 point out of 21 and expect to keep his job? There's the cup situation where I think, we've played 10 cup games, we've won 9 and drew 1 and lost a penalty shootout. Does that cloud the issue like it did in a way with Avram Grant?
Oh, good
we
point.
Don't know, do we?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because so the difference as well with the Avram Grant season is we were down the bottom. We had a mini recovery sort of February, March time before absolutely losing our last 9 games or 8 games or something like that. So we'd sort of managed to bob out of it, but we were rock bottom for a lot of the period. Apart from during the game against Leeds, I don't think, we haven't really been bottom 3, have we?
No.
In the actual pressure. But the problem you got is the difference between the Avram Grant season and this season is how Constantine it is. The fact is that sitting in 13th is a team, 2-3 points above us, Leicester? 2 points above us.
And as X said at the beginning of the show, you get points in the next 2 games. It will look that the league table will look very different. We'll still be in the mix. It's not.
Yeah, I know. It would take winning 4 or 5 games to sort of get us out of the mix
completely. Yeah.
And I'd imagine it's going to be a tough whole season. Couple of things I'll throw in. I said the other day we're unbeaten since David Gold died, so perhaps things are looking up. And then the other thing that I said on Claret and Booze the other day, and I'll stand by, is a lot of people did say that they'd be happy with finishing 17th and winning the Europa League. Well, we still got a good shot at that, but have the people got the bollocks to see out a season where you finish 17th? And what I'm saying by that is that to finish 17th, there's a good chance at some point you may be 19th or 18th during that run. Before you finish 17th.
Possible, yeah.
My mantra is because I'm not scared of being relegated. Yes, I've got the bollocks to see West Ham finish 17th and take a hit and run.
Well, I remember asking at the beginning of the season, I think it was one of these shows that we did on a Friday night. We talked about what would make you, what's the word? I didn't use the word happy, but what would you accept? West Ham to be if we won a cup competition, something like
I'd take if you said to me, "Oh, you're going to win the Europa Cup, but you're going to go down all day long." Let's put the trophy on the side there, because at the end of the day, when you put up the honours board, you don't go avoided relegation, do you? 2023. You'd put up Europa Cup Conference Champions 2023. That's what goes up.
What's your thoughts on that?
I 50% agree with Nigel there. So I totally agree that for me, if West Ham was to finish 17th and win the European Cup, the European equivalent, the Conference League, I would 100% take that, because Nigel's right. I've been supporting West Ham now for over 30 years, and at best I've seen us win a playoff final and the Intertoto Cup. I would love to see West Ham win something in my lifetime, and the older I get, the less likely it feels it's going to happen. So I would 100% take West Ham winning something. My only thing about getting relegated is that I think it would be so catastrophic for a club like West Ham to then play in the London Stadium, which I don't know. It's hard to estimate what the fans would be like. But when you look at the cup games, maybe at best it would be half filled, maybe. And
West
then
Ham till I die, innit? This new fan base, they'll go to any game. Surely fans won't. This new breed of fans won't walk away, will they? Just because we've gone down? Well, just because we're playing Rotherham, they won't walk away. They'll turn up for that. We'll have 70,000 against Rotherham, surely. If you read this fan base on Twitter, Jesus.
I do sense the sarcasm there, Nigel, and I think as well you'd lose all your best players, obviously, by going down. The wages that we now pay.
Best players after this team are being slagged off every game.
True. The wages we pay now, though, Nigel, we'd be in such a poor situation financially. And then I look at the clubs like, Leeds, how long it took them to get back, Nottingham Forest, how long it took them to make it. Look at Coventry and the state they're in. I just think if West Ham was to finish 17th on goal difference, mate, I would take that any day. If the win the trophy, I really, really, really would.
That would be really arsehole wobbling.
Yeah, exactly. and I would 100% take that because I want to see West Ham win something. And you're right.
But X, if we go down, it's an opportunity to bring Nigel's most favourite ever manager back to get us back up again.
Fuck you.
Who's that? Which manager's that?
Listen, we don't even mention his name. His records, his 4 years at the club have been expunged. But listen, if we go down, owners will have to put up, wouldn't they? So they'd have to. I've got every faith that we'd only be down there for 1 year. A club like West Ham. So I don't see a problem with it. I know the rest of the fan base did. Well, no, it was 1 year, wasn't it? Last time it was 2 years before the time before that.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. But yeah, no, it is a real tough. I'd still be going. As I said, I've had a season ticket from 1990 to 1991. That was my first season, and I've had it continuously ever since. So I've seen West Ham in the Championship equivalent, 3-4 seasons now, something like that. And so, and I've seen us relegated twice, I think it is in that time, 3 times in that time. And so I would stick around. But as you say, it's hard to predict with the new fan base that we have and the 60,000 stadium that we have. And I just think the Premier League, as much as I would wish it wasn't this way, Nigel, honestly, because I miss the old football where things weren't so Premier League orientated. Unfortunately, they are. And the money in the Premier League is so extensive compared to what it is in the Championship. Long term, I think it would be really detrimental if we was to get relegated.
Looking at it would probably set the club back a good 4 or 5 years. I'd actually argue the worst thing ever to happen West Ham was the relegation of 2003, because that scuppered the rebuilding of the chicken run. It led to a lot of really decent players being sold off, and then which led us ultimately down the road to Icelandics buying the club, going bankrupt, moving to Olympic Stadium. It's quite possible that if we hadn't been relegated in 2003, we would have redeveloped the East End, would have had 40-odd thousand at Upton Park, and they wouldn't have looked at the Olympic Stadium.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, and as you say, when we have been relegated, it's always led to something like that, losing the best players, the stadium. It always seems to put us back. We think we're on the brink of being a top club and achieving something, and then we have to go back and restart all over again. And I think it just would be too big a thing now to go down personally. But
how do you see it? I mean, how do you see the Premier League? I mean, I now look at the Premier League as a Super League of 7.
Yeah.
And the rest of us. And frankly, to finish top 6, you got to basically hope 2 of those 7 have a bad season. Realistically, it's Chelsea's turn this season. But the thing is, as much as a team gate crashes like Leicester did before us, like we did for 2 seasons, as much as you gate crash that top, they will then just the power, the might of the money that they've got behind them. They can just keep going. And I know a lot of people hope that there's a billionaire waiting to buy another football club. But you know, when you're dealing with the amount of money it takes now, and just imagine West Ham did get bought by, you know, I don't know, Qatar. Let's just take it. I'm not saying a thing, but let's just say it happened. The money they got to throw at it would be stupid amount of money, because the only way to get any money back is Champions League football. Well, you'll have 8 teams then running after 4 spots.
We'd be the sort of team that will be bought out by a Qatari consortium, and then their oil would run dry after a year.
yeah. Well, that's very true. I mean, I'd take Wigan as an example. Obviously, Wigan won the FA Cup. How long ago? 5, 6 years ago, was it? Now I can't remember. Time seems the same.
2013, wasn't it?
Was it 2013? Right, so it's a bit longer than I thought it was. But they won the FA Cup less than 10 years ago, or 10 years ago, and now they're sitting bottom of the Championship. And you know, obviously Wigan are a different club to us. They're not nowhere near the same size as us. No, it doesn't even compare. But I wonder if you was to say to their fans now, right, you won the FA Cup, but you got relegated and you haven't been back to the Premier League since, what they would take. I don't know the answer. But
the FA Cup. I've asked a couple of them.
Have
FA
you?
Cup.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
There's a couple I know on Facebook, on some of the non-West Ham groups I'm in, and I have actually put that to them, and they go all day long, FA Cup. Because it's a trophy. Because at the end of the day, why do we go football? And this is the thing I say to a lot of people. What do West Ham get? Say we finish 8th this season. What do we get for that?
Nothing for that.
A pat on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, even going down and winning a trophy, we're here for. That's what we should be looking at as fans. We want to see us win things, not just stay there, mid-table mediocrity every season, which will suck the life out of people. You know, this fan, but the only thing, the beauty of West Ham, the one thing, the beauty of West Ham is it's either feast or famine, but it keeps us occupied.
True.
Yeah,
it's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had 2 years where we think we're going to be Champions League. Now we're all arguing about going down, but at least it means we've got something to look forward to. Are we going to stay up or not? Yeah. If we were bobbing it along like 10th spot, you know, 8 points above relegation, 12 points away from European places, what we got to play for?
But if West Ham won the FA Cup, let's just say West Ham won the FA Cup this year, and then we got relegated. Yeah, how are your emotions going to be? I mean, I know you're a fan of the
mate. I could die a happy man.
Fair enough.
Joking? Well, for one, yeah, if you win the FA Cup, you get the same prize at the end of it as what you get for winning the Europa Conference League, which is a spot in the Europa League. Now, what you could argue is, well, if we get relegated, we're going to lose a lot of the better players. Then you could argue, well, we might be able to keep some of them, actually, because of the payments, the extra money we'll get from playing in the Europa League, cut in with the parachute payments, you probably can keep players for at least one season before you have to fire sale. So you'd get that one season, but again, you know, something to put up on that. You know, what have we got? You know, FA Cup in 64, 75, 18, European Cup Winners' Cup in 65. That's it. You know, it's embarrassing. You know, when you go to Arsenal's ground and they're running out of room for all the trophies, it goes all the way round, and ours fits on 4 balls.
Yeah,
that is what we need to do.
Okay, let's wrap this up, and I'm going to ask you one question each. If Moyes goes, if it happens over the next couple of games, and if Moyes, leaves West Ham, what sort of manager? You don't even have to give a name, but what type of manager would you want at the club to replace him? You can give a name if you want, but there's no suggestion that's an exclusive here or anything like that. But if Moyes doesn't do it over the next 2 games and it looks almost definite that he's gone, what type of manager would you want West Ham to have? Nigel.
I was going to say let Nigel go first.
All right. Well, look, listen. If I'm David Sullivan, I'd be on bended knees sitting in front of Bielsa and begging
Really?
him. Right, hold up. But
Go on.
is Bielsa going to take us to Champions League club? No, he's not. Is he going to challenge us for Europe? Quite possibly. Could we struggle? Maybe. Will it be fun? You bet your fucking life it will be.
Oh. I don't buy the Bielsa thing. I don't know. I did not see what all the fuss was about when he was at Leeds.
Well, Bielsa was the man that made Payet.
Yeah, well,
and the thing with Bielsa, I mean, he's gonna be 68 this year. So how long are you gonna have him as manager for? The age is against him for.
Well, you only get 3 years now, anyway.
True, but it'll be into his 70s then. So, I mean, I understand your point. I mean, he did great with Leeds, and he's got a good track record, definitely with all the clubs he's managed. I mean, his CV is extensive. You know, he's managed in Italy and France and national teams and Spain, and you know, you can't get much more experience than him. But I think. I always want West Ham to look outside the box a little bit, like something different. You know, I've heard good things about Celtic's manager. I can't say I know too much personally, but from speaking to people well placed in the game and so on, he's meant to be very good. His style of football is meant to be very good. The way he handles players, the press conferences, he's got good experience, albeit not at the top level. But he's managed Australia's national team. He's managed Japan. He's managing Scotland, so it seems like the natural step up now would be to manage in the Premier League. So he interests me. Someone like that.
He's not a young man either, X. He's quite.
No, he's not.
He's in his late 50s.
Is he? Yeah, well, I mean, he's still like a good 10 years younger than Nigel's one. So I mean, he's got
that. Yeah,
but
he's Greek. They live forever still.
Well, I know that, mate.
It's that olive diet.
And I think someone like him. People talk about Potter. It'd be interesting to see how damaged he is by the Chelsea experience. You know, if he could recreate at West Ham what he was doing at Brighton, it'd be a no-brainer. But obviously the Chelsea thing now is a bit of a dark cloud over whether he can handle big players and big egos. But I just want West Ham to try something different. The ultimate thing for me, though, would to be playing good football. I think West Ham fans can get behind the manager if things aren't going that well, if the football is good. You know, I think the main criticisms thrown at managers that have been criticised heavily before Moyes is now one. I'm assuming that Allardyce was the one we weren't allowed to talk about earlier. You know, the criticisms thrown at him for his style of football. If we could get somebody that wants to play it the right way, that attacks games, I'd much rather see West Ham lose 5-4, obviously, than 1-0. I know that's an obvious thing to say, but I'd much rather just see us attack. And I think it might have been you, Nigel, that says goals are fun. Is that your phrase? Yeah. So then
one of them.
I think, yeah. Yeah, so I think the entertaining style of football is the first thing, and then hopefully someone that can obviously turn that into winning football. And it's hard to name someone right now, but if I had to pick right now that's realistic, and I know some people would disagree, but it is the Celtic manager.
I mean, Moyes' football. I don't know how you see it. Moyes' football is it only works on results, because at the end of the day, it ain't the greatest football. It works in periods, and when you play badly and win, you go, well, at least we're winning. But when you play badly and lose to the quality of teams that we've lost to, and I think that's the big thing. I think it's only Arsenal in that run of 5 or 6 defeats that realistically, you would say, well, they're definitely going to beat us. The rest, the Crystal Palace, Leicester at home, Brentford, it's not really. We shouldn't be losing to those teams. So, and then it's dire. So, and that's the problem Moyes has got. He ain't got that. He don't play expansive football where you're more accepting of defeats, because when you're trudging yourself over there and watching shite football, it will grind on you.
Yeah. A couple of people have mentioned Bielsa's ex number 2, Carlos Calderon, who's been mentioned in a few stories. It's West Brom he manages at the moment. So he probably would have picked up some things from and a couple of people have also mentioned Michael Carrick, who's got the West Ham connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of praise because he's took Borough from, I think, 4th from bottom to like 7th or 8th, the fringe of the playoffs. So
but would those managers be more, if we went down, you'd get a manager similar to one of those who might look to get us in?
Carrick, maybe, if we'd gone down, I think 100%.
Yeah.
I don't know, though. He's always struck me as quite a loyal person. He stuck with us when we went down for a full season. Would he walk out on Borough? It's all right us going, oh, let's go and get him, let's go and get them. You got to remember that, certain people. The funny thing is, some people I know have said, like Ralph Hasenhüttl, had his hands cuffed. Realistically, if we're being honest, at Southampton. Another one from the Red Bull Mancha. I don't know,
What I would like, and it's not realistic now because he's just signed a 5-year contract, I think. But I think Brentford's manager, Frank's a good manager. Yeah, I mean, look what he's done for them. He's made them a very competitive Premier League team. He signs very, very well. The players he brings in, his recruitment and the team that he's got around him always seem to bring in players, make them good, sell a player, get a good replacement in and so on. So I think he would be. But unfortunately, he's signed a new contract. As you said, Michael Carrick is definitely one to keep an eye on. I mean, the guy you mentioned there at West Brom, he's meant to be decent as well. I just think, as you said, I think that'd be more if we were in the Championship than in the Premier League. I'd almost want someone with a bit more pedigree if we were to go, if we were to replace in the Premier League. But they're definitely worth keeping an eye on. That's for sure. And, it would be nice to have someone, in my opinion, that is going to do something different. That unfortunately for me, and one of my fears of keeping Moyes is that I could just see if Moyes does go. And I don't know factually. This is not ITK news or whatever. This is just my opinion. I think we would end up with someone like Sean Dyche or someone like that. I just think we would, because the board would go for a 6-month contract to see how it is. And I don't know.
I don't think Dyche is as bad as he's painted.
He's not. He's not, but it just sings the same thing to me. It seems like it's no difference. What we've done before, get something.
Yeah, you keep Moyes or do you go with Dyche? You're not really going to get, when Dyche comes in, he's going to, be ultra defensive. He ain't going to try and play his way out of it. He's going to try and stealth his way out of it.
Yeah.
The other name I'd throw in is Dortmund's manager, Edin Terzic, who obviously was Billich's assistant, and he, finishing runners up in Germany now to Bayern Munich is almost like winning a trophy.
Good shout. Okay. Let's wrap this up, because when I spoke to before we started, he said, "How long?" He said half an hour. I said, "Yeah, more or less."
Mate, I'm actually really enjoying it, and I never knew Nigel was turning up. Obviously, Nigel's added spice to it and needed things to argue back with. Some needed longer, but no, I've really enjoyed it, mate. It's actually really good debate and really interesting. No disrespect to Dave, but to hear someone else's opinion, because obviously I speak to Dave every time we do this. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and you're better than Sean.
Whenever Sean's on, this is Sean on screen.
Yeah.
Sean. Oh, just a minute. I've just got another text. Mate.
The fucking boiler's blown up. Yeah.
In all honesty, mate, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. And
likewise,
you love to have you back on again. Yeah. Let's see what happens after the next 2 games, and we may almost definitely have you back on. Thank you for coming on. I've just got one final question. Predictions for, I know you're going X, and I might see you there. But predictions for tomorrow.
We're going to win. We're going to win 2-1. Sorry, I jumped in there to start.
No, it's right. 2-1.
We're going to win 2-1. 2-1, we're going to win, yeah.
So, X, can you tell us the lineup today, please? Can we, before you...
It's no comment. No comment. I'll tell you, Dawson's not starting. I'll tell you that much.
You said that. Nigel, prediction for tomorrow.
I think I'll stick with what I went with. I think it was a draw. I don't see us winning. I think Wolves, you know, Lopetegui, fucking good manager.
Yeah.
I think I'll give you my three who will go down. I think Southampton will go quickly. I think Bournemouth will go, and
They'll drop, won't they?
And I think Forest will go. That's my three to go down.
Okay, good final question. Who will go down, X?
Southampton, I think Bournemouth as well. Forest are on a bit of a run at the moment, aren't they? There's usually a team that kind of falls from think they're really safe in mid-table, and then they suddenly fall dramatically. Now, there's no one jumping out to me at this point. Chelsea, maybe no. Maybe I'm trying to think of a team that could apply to someone. I want to say Crystal Palace, but that doesn't feel right when I say that. So. Yeah, I just feel like Forest might be able to get out of it now, but I definitely would agree. Bournemouth and Southampton, yeah.
And another.
Yeah, and one other. One to fall from not maybe Everton. You never know. Maybe
that would be a big drop, wouldn't it? That would.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And a question that Claret and Booze have put up. What have we learned tonight? Wow, good chat. I really appreciate it, and we really
don't go out on a Friday night. That's what we learned.
Exactly. Thank you for coming on. Thank you all. I'm sorry I didn't sort of put up more comments or respond to the comments. I do apologize for that, but I really appreciate you guys making comments as well. And thank you all for watching. So we'll see you all soon.